Hello, Pastor Barry McLaughlin here, and welcome to another episode of 7 Minutes of Scripture. Hope you're having a good start to your week, unless you're watching this on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever day of the week it is. But when we're filming this, it's Monday, so happy Monday. Hopefully it's a good one. I just finished walking out in the cold, so my face feels a little bit frozen because the winds are pretty bad today. And so, speaking of walking, yeah, how about these guys? Australopithecus. Did they walk on two legs? I said in Friday's video, it doesn't necessarily matter. Yeah, if you're not familiar with what Australopithecus is, I'd probably pause it here and watch Friday's video so that you can be kind of aware of what's going on with this. But we're talking about day 6 of creation, continuing Friday's discussion. And if you follow with me in Genesis 1:26, we've spent a couple of days kind of talking about the animals, the different categories of creation there. What does it mean when it says after their kind? Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all." I have to switch pages here, sorry. "Over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So when it says image there, and some guys like Henry Morris, Dr. Henry Morris, they have some really good notes on this in their commentary. He does particularly. When it says image there, this is what separates us from the animals. And from the apes and other animals in the animal kingdom, is that man is a trichotomy. Animals are body and soul. And I've mentioned that before. It talks, you might have heard people say the soulish creature. When it talks about the flood, it talks about those whom the breath of life, stuff like that. The soul is basically the mind. Humans are body, spirit, and soul. So there, and that's what we mean when we say people are spiritually dead. Adam sinned. That means he was cut off spiritually from God. But man has three components: body, soul, and spirit. And so this isn't necessarily a study on the trichotomy of man. I've done studies on that before. In fact, it's a really interesting study. You can actually look up body, soul, and spirit in the New Testament. You'll find the reference by Paul in Thessalonians, in fact, where he talks about it. I believe it's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, but you can fact check that if you want to check that out. But anyways, so we're talking about the significance of man. Man didn't evolve from animals. Man was created specifically and uniquely by God. And in Genesis 2, as we said last time, God actually formed man of the dust of the ground. And Genesis 2 is just kind of like a recapping of what happened on day 6 of Genesis 1. It's not like an additional narrative. But where we left off, we were talking about these Australopithecines, and I gave some evidence. I suggest to you to examine for yourself the fossil record. And from my studies in anthropology, basically I went through this family line, or this evolutionary line on Friday, and I suggest to you that there are no transitional fossils found. They claim that there's these, they're called bipedal hominids. Basically, bipedal means walking on two legs. Hominid, they're like these ape-like creatures. They would be considered to be apes. The Australopithecus is their name, super fancy. But basically, they believe that the Australopithecus branched off. Some evolved into modern apes. Others evolved into these other things like Australopithecus afarensis, fancy name. Simple name, Lucy, that's what they call her. Basically a short little ape that they believe walked on two legs. They believe that these things evolved into that, which eventually evolved into what's called the Homo genus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapien, Homo neanderthalis, all of those. And I would make the contention to you that there are no transitional fossils to link Australopithecus one to another. That means there's no evidence to suggest that there was an original Australopithecus, which we do find, like really old Australopithecus. When I say old, I mean thousands of years old. We're not talking about dating methods in this video. But there is nothing to connect Australopithecus, there's Gigantopithecus. You literally go down the list. There's tons of these things found. There are no in-between forms of one changing into another. All we find are the completed forms, and these are apes. The skull structures, the brain size, all those things, I would say indicate that they're apes. Do they walk on two legs? There's actually very little evidence to suggest they walked on two legs. Apes, modern primates, gorillas can walk on two legs, but they don't primarily because of the way their pelvis is angled with their spinal cord, they primarily walk like hunched over. Like you can do that, on your knuckles, that kind of thing, dragging your knuckles. That's an old phrase, but so these guys, even if they did walk on two legs, which there's minimal evidence of, that does not prove anything. It just means that they walk on two legs. We were watching penguins walk the other day. My wife and I were on a documentary on Antarctica, and they walk around like little people. That does not mean that we evolved from them 65 million years ago. So just so you know, that's literally nothing. There are no transitional fossils. Now, by the way, so these are apes. I would argue once you get into what's called the Homo genus, like Homo habilis, I believe from what I've seen, I could be wrong about some of these early ones. There are some that, and here's the tricky thing with this. Homo habilis, we don't know that all the things that they claim to be Homo habilis are Homo habilis. So just to say that. But Homo habilis is one of the first in supposedly like the human category, if you will, if they're talking about like an evolutionary chart. I would say these guys are human though. The brain size, and again, that's also tricky too, because we have smaller brains than Neanderthals, and you just get into the idea of like within the range of what I would consider to be human fossils. The things they did, they made fire, they used tools, they had language. Neanderthals buried their dead, they built structures, they had tattoos, they did things that were like very, very advanced. People in the Neolithic period, that would be the age of when they first started farming, they have discovered like that these guys were smelting copper 1,000 years before they ever thought they could. So the more we study history, the more we study that early people were actually super smart. Like I said, Neanderthals had bigger brains than us by 50 cubic centimeters. So if some of these guys have slightly smaller brains than modern humans, it doesn't mean that they're less intelligent, doesn't mean they're less evolved, because I think we're every bit as intelligent as the Neanderthals, but they have bigger brains. And so the brain size doesn't necessarily matter. I think that these things are all human, like Homo neanderthalis. I just call them early humans. You have, and there's reasons why, and we'll get into part 3 on Wednesday because we are fresh out of time, why Neanderthals might be bigger, why these guys might have smaller facial structures and things like that. But these are all evidence of humans. They are really no different than us. It's just they don't have the technology. They have iPhones and other things like that. But there's no link between the Homo genus and Australopithecus. There is no transitional fossil where you see this Australopithecus changing into what I would call early humans. And so it just doesn't exist. On Wednesday, I want you to be prepared because we are going to continue this discussion of talking about why they look different, what happens there. Were they really different than us? The other thing is, what about the genetic evidence? I'm going to suggest to you that there's no genetic evidence for evolution. And I want to give you some reasons why. So that's going to be Wednesday's video. We'll continue to talk about how we are made in God's image. And we're out of time. We're over 7 minutes by far. God bless you all, your families, and we'll see you in Wednesday night's video.